may have noticed in the last class 2 weeks ago, we lost internet after about 50 minutes. Right now, because of that, it cut out the last maybe 10-20 minutes of conversation. And I personally think it might have been the guardian Davis protecting me, because when I listened back, I remembered, I thought, no, I got to change what I said. At the end of last class, I did call. There was a discussion about what about those people who are not deep into Vipassana. As Buddhists, how do we look at precepts and practice for people who are perhaps not so deep into Vipassana? And I took somewhat of a hard line saying, well, get into Vipassana slowly. Actually, that's not the way the Buddha handled it. And so after that reflection, I went back and changed a few slides from last class. So let's go to the, when taking refuge, what are the danger or trouble that we need to be protected from? First, are dangers related to the present life. These are things like the fragile nature of our body, or dissatisfaction when expectations do not match reality. You know, somebody comes up and says, how are you? I say, oh, I'm doing great. Well, actually, that's covering over things, because one phone call, one meeting with my boss, one message, one email could change that dramatically. I find out that my position has been made redundant, the wife is sick, everything changes. So it's very unstable. There was a 8th century Buddhist philosopher called Shantideva, and he wrote a book, The Path of the Bodhisattva. And in that, so he was a Mahayana, but he gave a philosopher, but he gave a very interesting analogy. In his book, he said, there's no way I could find enough leather to cover the whole world. But just the leather on the soles of my feet is enough to protect me. So too, there's no way I can change the course of things in the world. No way I can change how the life is full of sharp stones. But simply protecting my mind, I can be protected. Developing equanimity about what happens is a way of protecting oneself. So these are the kind of dangers that the precepts, or the taking refuges, it protects the mind, which is the contact point with the world. The second aspect of protection is dangers related to the future life. Many people are focused on, okay, what if I karma? How am I going to get reborn? What's my next life going to be like? And so this is another area of protection that we need protection from. And then there is the ultimate protection, dangers related to the general course of existence, the unsatisfactoriness of samsara, the fact that I'm not talking just about that health changes and life changes. I'm talking about momentary, moment-to-moment existence exists only for a moment. Phenomena exist only for a moment. There's nothing substantial there, nothing to put one's feet on. And when one experiences this, I remember one time I was experiencing this directly, things are falling away. It felt like there was suddenly no floor underneath me. And there was this visceral reaction to nothing supporting None of aggregates were there to support. Completely have fallen away. So these are the three areas that we need protection from. In the last class, I talked about Mr. A and Mr. B, comparing their views on refuges, precepts, and meditation. There was a question, hey, could there be a Mr. C? And so what I've done is now I put it into three people, but instead of calling them A, B, and C, I'm giving them specific viewpoints. So the virtuous non-Buddhist, this person does not take formal refuges, doesn't go for refuges, doesn't see the need from it, or the need from it. Yeah, they admire, Buddhism sounds good, but they don't feel motivated to commit themselves to Buddhism. Virtuous non-Buddhists. They don't take precepts, but they lead a ethical living for social or personal reasons. They're just ethically natured. They do meditation for calmness, happiness, or well-being. Now, something that I was doing a little bit of digging historically about the Pali Text Society. It was founded in 1881, and I've talked about it earlier. These are the people who have translated all the Buddhist texts into English. They were the first ones. T.W. Rice Davis, Caroline Rice Davis, his wife, and then I.B. Porter, and so on. Each of these people, for more than 140 years, have been dedicating their lives to translating texts, preserving Pali texts, and translating them into English. And there have been 9 presidents of the Pali Text Society since it was formed in 1881, the last 140 years. The first 8 were not Buddhists. They were academics. None of them took refuges, none of them took precepts. Only the most recent president, Geta, is a publicly acknowledged Buddhist. Right? So these people, they admire Buddhism very much. They dedicate their lives to translating Buddhist texts and promoting Buddhist texts. They're very ethical people. The way that they practice meditation is more for calmness, compassion, and well-being. Right? Now there is, we're into the outgrown Buddhists. The Buddhists focus on a good rebirth. Most of the people that the Buddha met were not monks. Right? Many of the people he met, the lay people, were not going to become arahants. They were people like Sigalovada, which we talked about, and some others that I'll mention, where the Buddha was talking to people who were not perhaps interested in escaping from samsara, but were more focused on what do I get now? And how's it going to affect my life in the short term and the next rebirth? So for them, refuges are typically ritualistic and protective. They do it they take refuges as a precept, take the refuges as a ritual and protective. Precepts, they observe. Why do they observe precepts? They say, oh, this will give me merit. It will give me a lot of good merits and a good rebirth. That's their focus often. Meditation for cultivation of merit or basic calm. These are what I could call maybe the lay Buddhists. The lay Buddhists. Now I'm going to contrast that with the Buddhist focus on Nibbana. They're highly committed to refuges as wisdom-based. They're wisdom-based because they really understand the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha with deep insight, and that drives them to taking refuges. Their precepts, why do they take precepts? It's not just to be good. It's because they recognize that taking precepts and keeping precepts is a foundation for meditation. their focus is on meditation. They take the precepts because that's how you become that's how you develop your vipassana. I remember when I was a samanera, right? So I was being very serious, looking for development. One day, there was some ants in the room, and I swept them away, and I killed them. Okay? Now, I had broken my precepts. So, immediately, I went to my teacher, my supervisor, the monk who I was under training, and said, okay, I have to confess this. And he said, you have to retake your precepts to make them pure again. And so I did. I retook my precepts as a samanera, the samanera precepts, not the 8 precepts, not the 5 precepts, the samanera precepts, the 10 precepts of a samanera in a formal way, because that was my experience after killing the ants. And before I retook the precepts to purify, the mind was disturbed and my meditation was disturbed. So the reason that I'm observing precepts, it's not because it's good, it's because gives a solid foundation for insight. Meditation for systematic insight for nibbana. That's the purpose of meditation. So this, being a monastic, is not for everyone. Many lay people, and probably many of you in this class, are probably either in this focus on good rebirth or maybe somewhere in between. I don't want to say that these are 2 kind of extremes for lay people. All right. And so in the last class, I was doing hard lines saying, oh, I gotta get this teaching for Nibbana. No, that's not the way the Buddha treated things. The Buddha acknowledged that there are many people, lay people, who are focused on good rebirth. If you're a monastic, you got into this category. you become a monastic to become search for Nibbana. Yeah.
To be on the
yeah.
We were to say that we have to be in the second one. You need to have a good condition, a good people before you can actually go to that level. And is it the prerequisite?
Okay. We have been born as human. All right. So therefore, we've already in this life got a great opportunity. The Buddhists, the humans who are focused on a good rebirth, they focus on dana and sila. They are going to get another good rebirth as a human, or maybe even as a deva. However, the dana, sila, and bhavana, not the bhavana, not the bhavana that takes you to the jhana states and gives you to the Brahman realms, but the vipassana type of insight bhavana, that will take you to this. So we have already a good rebirth.
Still correct, we take a stand that Buddhists already have a good rebirth.
Not just a Buddhist. Buddhists also have a good rebirth. All humans good rebirth.
Is another level. Being the non-Buddhist also have good rebirth,
Not necessarily.
In this level, jump into
to non-Buddhists, absolutely. Absolutely.
But they have to learn all these basic.
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. They don't have to first be focusing on a good rebirth. I'll take myself as an example. Okay. When I was a child, I was a non-Buddhist, right? Because I had not been exposed to Buddhism at all. So therefore, but I had this sense of morality. I wanted to do the right thing. Even though I didn't had no exposure to Buddhism whatsoever, I really wanted to lead my life in a good and proper way. So I would have fallen into the virtual non-Buddhist. I never heard of the refuges, the precepts at that time. When I started studying and learning, my focus was not so much on, oh God, make sure my next rebirth is good. It was, yes, I acknowledge that samsara is difficult. I want to escape from samsara. It took me decades to get to the point where conditions allowed me to commit enough time and effort to commit to vipassana. But so I was kind of in between here, right? I wasn't yet at the focusing on meditation, didn't have the conditions, didn't support it for me personally. And I think there's others that are in a similar kind of environment. It's not like this, you have to go from step 1, step 2, step 3. Other question? Okay. So let's compare the good rebirth seeker with the nibbana seeker. The good rebirth seeker, they find happiness and comfort in the future lives as a human deity or higher being. The goal is improvement within samsara. I want to make sure that my next rebirth is good. The nibbana seeker seeks liberation from samsara, not within samsara. I just want to get out of this whole thing. I want to escape. The goal is final cessation of suffering through the ending of craving and ignorance. That's a difference between the two types of Buddhists. The good rebirth seeker views samsara as a place where one can find better circumstances for merit, field of opportunity. Hey, I have opportunity to offer dana. I have opportunity to be virtuous, and that will help me get a good rebirth. Nibbana seeker sees samsara as inherently unsatisfactory, something to be escaped from. Even when I had never been exposed to Buddhism, there still was this gut feeling of there's something wrong here. I got to escape from this. Regardless how pleasant the rebirth may seem, even heavenly realms are bound to decay and death. You get to go to the highest jhana realm, highest Brahma realm, 81,000 universe lifetimes. Great. But after that, you're still reborn into another realm. So it's like going on a long vacation, but you come back, you still have to face the same old stuff at work, even though you had a good time on vacation. This one is the nature of samsara is unsatisfactory. Their main practices are generosity for the good rebirth seeker. Their main practices are generosity, dana, observing morality, sila, occasional meditation for common merit, and faith in the common its results. The nibbana seeker strongly emphasizes seeing the three characteristics in each of Nibbana, no label of power, letting of craving of all existence, including good states. I don't even want to be reborn in a good state. I just don't want to get out of this whole cycle. Again, I want to stress that you can think of these as two different extremes within the Buddhist. Buddhism is not like you're necessarily fully in one or fully in the other. You can be having a foot in both camps if you want. The good rebirth seeker seeks to create good karma for better results, because karma is used to shape future pleasant experiences. They look for merits. Nibbana seeker seeks to end all karma producing activities, uprooting ignorance. Even good karma is seen as a form of bondage if it leads to renewed becoming. The view on karma. The faith tends to be the center of the law of karma, and their teachings that support moral conduct and blessings. They may rely on rituals or blessings for protection. Whereas in Nibbana seeker, faith ensures them with confidence in the path to direct knowledge. From my vipassana experience, yeah, it's true. Emphasis on personal verification and seeing conditionality, non-self directly. Good rebirth seeker is often motivated by hope, fear of lower realms, desire for security and comfort. Whereas the Nibbana seeker is motivated by disenchantment, viraga, dispassion, and a sense of urgency, samvega. There's a quiet resolve end of all becoming. There's a little different motivation. Again, it's not like something, you may not be fully in the good rebirth seeker or fully as a Nibbana seeker, but these are two different extremes on Buddhists. Now, the Buddha was able to address the needs of the good rebirth seekers. So when dealing with lay people, he usually talked to them not about the Noble Eightfold Path, not about the Four Noble Truths. That's not how the Buddha talked to lay people. Because lay people are generally the good rebirth seekers. So here's an example. If beings knew, as I know, results of giving and sharing, they would lose without having given. Even their last morsel, they would share. So the Buddha said, look how important dana is. And as we will see a little later, we will go through the Sikalabhata Sutta in some detail, how important sila or morality is. That's his main focus with rebirth seekers, or let's just say with, let me just simplify this by saying lay people and monastics. This is the lay people approach. Faith, moral shame, moral dread, wholesome giving, qualities pursued by which one goes to the world of Demas. So he did talk about, hey, how do you get to the world of Demas? This would have been addressed to lay people. This would not have been addressed as a goal for monks. Now, the MN 135 is the Chula Kama Vibhanga Sutta, the shorter explanation of Kama. I'll give you the story behind it, kind of interesting one. There was a very rich merchant named Tudaya. And Tudaya was very, he had no respect for the Sangha. So when the Buddha came to Tudaya's house, Tudaya would yell at him and say, go away, go away. Don't disturb me, I'm not going to give you anything. Get out of here. So this is the way in which Abhidhamma treated the Buddha, treated all monks. Then one day, Buddha died and left all his money to his son, Suma. And one day, Suma was away, and the Buddha came to Suba's house, now Suba's house. And Suba's dog came and started barking at the Buddha. And the Buddha said, hey, Buddha, when you were a human, you barked at me, when you were a dog, you barked at me again. And the dog put his tail between his legs and he ran into the house and he hid. Suba came back home and got to the gate. Usually the dog would run out to greet him. No dog. So Suba goes in and says, hey, where's the dog? The servants say the Buddha came and called the dog Tudaya, and the dog ran into the house. Now, for a Brahmin, being reborn as a dog is a very, very bad thing. Right? Very bad, particularly bad. So Suba was furious. This was a huge insult to his family to say that his father had been reborn as a dog. So he charged out to go and confront the Buddha. Why did you call the dog as my father? Why did you insinuate that my father was reborn as a dog? So fortunately, the Buddha was able to calm Suba's mind, and the Buddha said to Suba, look, let's do a test. before he died, your father buried a whole bunch of treasure. Here's what I want you to do. Go back home, feed the dog really well until it's very tired. And when the dog is about to go to sleep, whisper in its ear, Father, where is the treasure? And so Suba says, hey, this is great. Because if the dog finds the treasure, I get a lot more money. If it doesn't work, I can discredit the Buddha. It's a win-win for me. So we went home, did this, and of course, the dog took Suba to the treasure. Then Suba started thinking, why was my father reborn as a dog? So he went to the Buddha and he asked the Buddha, why are some people born rich? Why are some people born poor? Why are some people born healthy? Why are born sick? How does karma work? And then the Buddha answered him, explaining how karma influences one's rebirth. So this is what the Buddha said. A person who kills, all right, so a murderer, after death, reappears in an unwholesome realm. Okay, so in other words, you kill, you're going to end up in hell or one of the other. Or if born as a human, okay, so if you don't end up in one of those bad realms, if you do happen to be born as a human, you have a short life. On the other hand, the Buddha said, on the other hand, a person who abandons killing after death reappears as a deity. Or if not as a deity, if they're born as a human, they have a long life. So the karmic energy that sustains life, the moment of rebirth, if the person was bad in the previous life, it's weak karmic energy to sustain life, short life. If the person was abandoned killing, strong life energy, long life. Now, there are other factors that come into play, but this is the starting point. There is after this productive karma that produces life for your life. There are other factors that are supportive, destructive, and impeding karma. There is other karma that impacts, but it's your starting point at the moment of conception. Then the Buddha said, I'm going to go through each of these. If you're a person who harms people, either you're going to be reborn in a woeful state, or if you're reborn in a good state, your health is weak, you're sickly. If you're someone who is not cruel to people, is very kind to people. If you're either reborn as a deva, or if you're reborn as a human, you're going to be healthy. You're going to have a healthy life at the moment of birth, right? Because some people have a weak constitution, weak health, are born with weak health. Some people are born with strong health. If you are an angry person, prone to anger, scolding, you're born in hell, or if born as a human, then you're going to be ugly. If you are someone who is gentle and kind, not angry, then you're Deva, or if you're born as a human, you'll be beautiful. And a person's looks are initially started out from at the moment of conception. Right? Of course, there's a lot of changes that happen later, but it's at the moment of conception. If you are not spiritually oriented, don't care about spiritual stuff, then you are reborn stupid. Actually, the way it says it in the sutta is if you don't ask questions to monks, then you're gonna be reborn as stupid. So if you don't ask questions in this class. So so if you are not spiritually oriented, then you're born stupid. If you are spiritually oriented, then you will naturally be reborn as intelligent, if born as a human, otherwise as a baby. If you are envious, you are reborn insignificant, lower level, lower class. If you are not envious, if you show a lot of mudita or sympathetic joy for other people, then you'll be reborn as a powerful person. If you're stingy in this life, you're reborn as poor. If you're generous in this life, you'll be reborn as rich, rich man. If you're arrogant, you get a low rebirth. If you are humble, you'll have a high rebirth. Now, I want to just stress this, that Buddha was talking about things that are, it's the starting point for when you are born, right? Your parents, your physical looks, your physical health, your intelligence. Yeah, all that comes at the moment of your birth. For the moment of the birth, moment of conception, of course, a lot of stuff happens that's going to adjust it, right? Some that'll support it, some that'll weaken it, some that'll cut it off. There's all sorts of different types of karma. But your life, your actions in this life will determine your starting point in the next life. If as a human, right? It can determine your realm, or as a human, your starting point. So I'm just gonna summarize the whole description very quickly here. Any questions on that? Normally, comment, bring up questions. Okay. Remember what I said about being born stupid, right? Oh, yes, a question.
He said, that's pretty big, is right. You know,
That's why in the text, if you read the actual Pali words, it talks about inquiring from monks, inquiring from teachers, right? Now, I reworded it to be saying spiritually oriented. So, exactly. So it's not necessarily, I was just using that as a joke. The fact that you are here it demonstrates that you are spiritually oriented. You're investing the time to listen and consider this. You have invested the time to look at the suttas. You have invested time to listen to monks. That to me shows that you are very spiritually oriented. So therefore, that will support your next life as being intelligent. Even if you're shy about asking questions.
Is in this understand not be long be right, but you are be but it is just model material stuff. It's about
Okay. The path to, if you practice sila, samadhi, panya, depending on how you practice the panya, that's where the vipassana comes in. The purpose of vipassana is enlightenment. That's the target. Now, what I believe is that I'm building up habits in this life. I'm building up habits of vipassana. And so therefore, in my next life, there will be this tendency toward vipassana. And that's going to pull me toward vipassana. And eventually, may not be this life, it may not be the next one, but all of this attraction to vipassana is putting me on a path to enlightenment. If I have no interest in vipassana in this life, then where is the draw in the next life to vipassana? And so, if I've got no interest in vipassana in this life, even though I may be moral and be a good person, yes, I get a good rebirth, but and maybe those habits will continue on, I'll still be a good person, and we'll get another good rebirth, and then another good rebirth, just keep going on and on, more and more good rebirths. But only way to escape this, Sarah, is vipassana. So dana and sila will get you good rebirths, but you need a special kind of bhavana, not the concentration kind, but the vipassana kind, the insight kind, that will give you to some sort. Yeah. Yes, I agree with you. If you love vipassana will love you. Again, my own personal experience is, even though I had never been exposed to anything Buddhist or any people or books or any Buddhist information, when I went back and started doing some deep reflection of what do I truly believe, it came up with many, many Buddhist principles. Later, I found out that these principles that I had come up with, quote, on my own, were in fact Buddhist. And I initially had a lot of disbelief. I said, there's no way that all these ideas I've come up with align with a major religion. And I started reading, and I went, yeah. And when I eventually started thinking about the actual practice and talked to a monk, and I brought this up with the monk, said, yeah, you were a Buddhist in a previous life. Clearly, you have a karmic affinity to the Dhamma. And so that's why it brought you there. And so I believe that, I don't know, that my next life, there will be a karmic affinity to the Dhamma and probably the Abhidhamma as well. And the Vipassana. I believe that will happen. So, yes, it's a very high goal to look for enlightenment in this life. But Vipassana is putting me on a path that, I don't know how many existences, it'll get me there.
What do you think will be the trigger point for the paradigm shift from what trigger from a day to this to that path? Besides karma, I presume karma play a part. There must be something that trigger you to make that job.
In my opinion, it is the people with whom you associate. It's the people with whom you associate. So that is the trick, because, and again, I'm going to go back to the time of the Buddha. The way you learn something is at the foot of a teacher, right? So it was your teacher. Right? These days, you don't just learn from an individual, you can learn from books, you can learn from the internet. And so starting to explore and examine the internet, or I mean, the teachings, the Dhamma. So exposure to the Dhamma and the right kind of people to influence you along the way. Those, to me, in my opinion, are the absolutely critical things. If I had not, okay, so if I had not started, if I kept it myself at the theory level, just reading books, there's only so far that would have brought me. It was one day, because, okay, at that time, this is still back in Canada, I was thinking to myself, you know, I read all this Buddhist stuff, and it sounds really great. I said, however, I've also read the Bible, and it sounds great too. But I can see in the past, there's been a lot of problems caused by religion. people killed because of religion. Then I read something in a book that said there's never been a religious war over Buddhism. Yes, Buddhists have gone to war, of course, for greed, for property, for territory, for money. But it's never been a religious war, Buddhist versus another. So, okay, that's a good sign. But I still wasn't yet ready to step into the practice, away from the theory and into the practice, because I was worried that when I started mingling with all these practitioners, I would see all their human side and it would be disillusioning. The books were great. You don't get disillusioned with books, but when you start dealing with real people, it can be disillusioning. And one day I said, you know what, if all these practitioners also read these books and find value in these books, maybe I should try. And I made that step. First step, I went to I was in Canada, Toronto, looked up B for Buddhist temple in the phone book. There was one close to where I was working, and it was a Pure Land school. Hong Kong Chinese Pure Land school. Okay, that's close to me. I'll go there. I walked in, all of these statues and calligraphy and symbolism. I was walking around. I said, this doesn't do anything for me. This is not my culture. And a nun, gray robe, shaved head, came up to me and started talking to me. And I said, look, none of this means anything to me. I'm interested in starting to practice, but I can't relate to any of this. She said, you want practice without any symbolism. Here is an address. Here's a contact for a Zen master. Zen is best for you. Okay, that was her advice. And so I started practicing Zen. I went to the Zendo. I went to the meditation every morning before going off to work. Started practicing Zen meditation. Because there's very, very little, I won't say zero, but very little symbolism and ritual in Zen. Just a lot of meditation. When I came to Asia, looked around and couldn't find any Zen temple. So my next closest was Theravada. So, but then it's just people from there on. So it was going from the theory of the book, stepping into the practice, starting to interact with people. So it was my Zen teacher, that very first Mahayana nun, don't even know her name. Those are the people that that put me on the path. So it's the people you mix with.
Came to the east. You stay and then
I say Canada, who knows what would that? Why did I get yes?
Or because of work.
Both.
Yes.
And I said, yeah. I went to my boss and I said, I want to move to Asia somewhere. Yeah. Yeah. So again, the point here is that the karma that you generate in this life gives you the starting point for the next thing. After that, it's much more complicated. Right? But the starting point of your health level, your starting point for longevity, your starting point for beauty, starting point for what kind of family you're born into, your intelligence, your starting point for all of that, it comes from your previous life. After that, it is a lot of stuff that happens during this life that impacts it. Now, there was a very old couple went to the Buddha and they said, we've been married for a long, long time, decades we've been married and we're so happy. We've never had any arguments, any fights. How do we make sure that we're going to be together in the next life? And the Buddha said, couples with the same faith, the same morality, the same generosity, and the same wisdom will be together in their future life. So, and I have been asked this. My mother-in-law asked me before she passed away, how do I make sure that I meet up again with her husband, who had already passed. And I told her, faith, morality, generosity, and wisdom, that brings you together. And I genuinely believe that in a previous life, my wife and I, same faith, same knowledge, same generosity, same wisdom. So, if you don't have the same, no, I mean, okay, I would say that my
people at the present life not at the same age. We look at the world with something.
this is who will be your spouse in a previous life. The question here is, how do you make sure that in the next life you're gonna have the same spouse?
Is that the reason my spouse of the quality is special?
If your spouse doesn't do the same, yep, there are 4 facts. 3 out of 4. I guess 75% chance. The Buddha did not define wisdom. I mean, for example, my wife, right? I am more on Abhidhamma, she is more on Vipassana. Right? So is it we're generally on the same wisdom, but not exactly. No 2 people are gonna have exactly the same wisdom, but generally on the same.
Yeah, practicing like the
So you got 3 to 4, 75% chance. So
Okay.
the reason that I brought up these quotes is to show that very often the Buddha addressed the need of guru seekers. These quotes are aimed for lay people. These quotes are aimed for people who are not shooting for enlightenment. All right? And so the Buddha did not look down on them. He did not scold them and say, no, you gotta be a monastic and go for no way. Actually, historically, it wasn't until Lady Sayadaw, who lived in the 1880s in Myanmar, he was the first one to introduce the idea of Abhidhamma for lay people and Vipassana for lay people. Before that, Abhidhamma and Vipassana were only for monastics. So for the first 2,400 years, Abhidhamma and Vipassana, which is something that we now take almost for granted that we have access to, there was no access for lay people. If you wanted to know anything about Abhidhamma, if you wanted to do Vipassana, you had to become a monastic. And so things have changed in the last 140 years. All right, from the first 2,400 years. So the Buddha did address both groups of people. Okay, the lay people who are interested in good rebirth, generating good karma, and the monastics who should be escaping from karma, who should be escaping rebirth. Now, here's a quote from the Dhammapada. When threatened with danger, men go to many refuges. to mountains and forests, parks and gardens, to sacred trees. But such a refuge is not a safe refuge, not the best refuge. One is not liberated from all evil and consequences of existence, from dukkha, for having come into such a refuge. One who takes refuge in the Buddha Dhamma Sangha sees the Four Noble Truths from insight knowledges. This indeed is the safe refuge. This is the best refuge. Having come to this refuge, one is liberated from all dukkha. Clearly, this is aimed at monks. Okay, so when Buddha was talking about refuges, sometimes he's talking to monks, sometimes he's talking to lay people. Now, in the refuge, if we're talking about the refuges, the first monks were personally ordained by the Buddha. According to the Vinaya, the Buddha said, "Come, monk, what is founded is the Dhamma, live the holy life, make a complete end of suffering." Once the Buddha said those words, standard phrase, that said, okay, you're now a monk. You're now one of my followers. That's how one became a monk. That's how the first 5 monks, right? The 5 ascetics, with this phrase. In the Vinaya, by the way, there's multiple books in the Vinaya. They start out describing the 227, the 227 rules, and then there is expansion on those rules. Then there's a section of Mahabharata, the great chapter, where it starts telling the whole life of the Sangha. And it's in the very first section of the first chapter where it tells the story where the Buddha will use these words. So this is how the first 5 ascetics became monks, and this was recited. Then what happened was there was a young, wealthy guy by the name of Yasa. And he was young and partying. And one day he was out partying and he woke up early. He looked around, he saw the dancing girls just lying there, wow, and said, "I gotta get out of this. This is not the meaning of life. Constant partying, and the next morning, no." So he went to his parents and said, "No, I gotta get out of this." He went to the Buddha. The Buddha said, "Come, okay, leave the whole, take a complete end of suffering." Yasa then went to his 4 friends, also who liked to party with him, previously partied with him, talked to them, and all 5 of them became monks using this phrase. Then they brought in 50 more people. Each of them had followers, kind of their entourage came, and each of the 5 had 10 followers, so they had another 50 people come in. They all became monks and practiced until they all became arahats. This is the first 60 arahats. Then the Buddha sent 60 arahats out to the remote village. Say, go spread the Dhamma. All 60 of you are arahats. So who are the 60? The Buddha? Who are the 60 arahats underneath him? There are the 5 ascetics, Yasa and his 4 friends, and then each of them, there are 50 entourage. And the Buddha said, okay, now all of you go in a different direction and spread the Dhamma. What he said to them is, okay, how does one become? Let's say you go and somebody wants to become a monk. What do? You're far away from me. According to the Vinaya, what happens is you shave your head and beard, wear the robe of dyed cloth, upper robe over one shoulder, pay respect, even the monk, squat on your haunches, hands in an anjali position. So you will notice that very often when monks, recently I was up at KKB and they were doing the opening ceremony for us, and you saw the monk standing there were actually 2 monks standing in front of the altar on their haunches like this. I can't do it. I think it's not so good, but that's a standard positioning for the monks. They they'll be on your haunches and hands in an undulating position. Then you recite the 3 refuges. That is how you become a saraṇaṃ. It's simple as that. You just shave your head, wear the robe, pay respect to the monks, down on your haunches, hands in the angelic position, say, Buddham saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Buddham saraṇaṃ gacchāmi. Right, you're now a saraṇaṃ. The ceremonies in the Vinaya are incredibly simple. They're not complicated. When we were up at KKB, those 2 monks, they said, okay, they said in Pali, all right, we're opening wasa in this compound. It took about 10-15 seconds for them to say their little bit. That's all it was. It wasn't an elaborate ceremony. It was a simple, practical ceremony. So then the saraṇaṃ still had to go back to meet up with the Buddha to become fully enlightened. That's fully ordained. After a while, this started to become a little bit. And so, oh, by the way, when I became a saraṇaṃ, what did I have to do? Just this. The same becomes not full ordained. Take the 3 refuges, and I had to take the 10 precepts. Okay? So it's not a fancy, elaborate, complicated ceremony. It is just simply with your heart. Taking the 3 refuges, taking the precepts, in this case 10 precepts, of a saraṇaṃ, and that's it. Nothing complicated. However, if I wanted to become full ordination, the Buddha then later said, okay, there's the ceremony, and it's very, very simple. You need ideally 10, but in a remote location, get by with 5 ordained monks. Saraṇaṃ comes up and has to answer a few questions. Okay? Questions are: are you 20 years old? Do you have your parents' permission, if appropriate? Do you have any debt? Are you in any government service? Do you have any obligations to the government? Do you have any communicable diseases? You say, and you clear all that, you go, okay. You are now, then the senior one says, any objection? No objections, okay, fine, you're upper, the upper ordination. So I just want to stress how simple the Buddhist ceremonies are. They're not complicated. Not a lot of chanting and stuff like that. That's ladies. Yeah.
It feels like mentioned about some people seeking refuge in the mountains in the cities and all that, right?
Yep.
So the thing is, you did not mention there are a lot of Buddhist people who say this before, stop the problem.
Right.
We also understand the teachings of the Buddha that they tell us.
Yep.
They are also looking at us. It's not that they will appear in the normal person, a normal person to the person is the active.
Okay. The devas, okay, cannot help us get enlightened. Because
they have problems which are not
Yep.
that way, but it comes from people.
Right.
They really get stroke,
right,
so they can use the but they think that it's their to go to the watching better
right,
people who use France to help them to lead them to transfer to and enlighten their worries and
okay. I remember when my teenage son was behaving like a teenager, because he was a teenager. So my wife and I were like, what do we do? What do we do? What do we do? So we consulted many different people, psychologists. You could say, I mean, you could say, we didn't go to any soothsayers, but we approached different people who had different expertise, who we had some level of confidence in. And one of the people to whom we approached was Ante Mahinda. What do we do? And many monks get this all the time. People come to them with their problems. Ajahn Brahm talks about having to be a garbage pail with an empty bottom because people keep dumping garbage in and it has to go right through. He can't keep any of it. Or else it's a big problem for him. So Ante Mahinda gave a very interesting comment. Ante Mahinda said, in the morning when you do your morning chanting and your morning precepts, share the merit with the household devas. Because the household devas can have an influence in helping on these worldly things. The household devas cannot help you get enlightened. You got to go to the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha for that. But for worldly type stuff, like a misbehaving teenager, the household devas can influence their minds and help. So this is like in the Ratana Sutta we talked about earlier, right? The Buddha said, oh, you devas, all you earthbound and heavenly bound or low heavenly bound devas, these humans keep bringing you their sacrifices, right? Treat them with loving kindness. Be nice to them. And so in the Ratana Sutta, the Buddha said then, by the power of the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha, the power of all of these things, help may the humans be helped. And the devas got rid of the disease, got rid of all of the dead people, the death, the plague, the evil, all the evil spirits all went away because of devas. Okay, so in my opinion, you want to go and see some soothsayer. Okay, if you have faith in that soothsayer, right, just do it with your eyes wide open and take their advice. Sometimes they could give good advice, right? Not just because they're a soothsayer doesn't mean that they give bad advice. So that's my personal view on it. For spiritual development, only go to the Buddha Dhamma Sangha. However, for worldly type things, devas and other lots of sources of information. Okay. Any other questions? Any questions from online group? I don't hear anything.
Let us recall and make the confidence and goal so focused study in good faith and wise intention. We learn and understand some of the teachings. Remember that it does not understanding change. We seek to clear